spiel?
Yeah, I think that'd be fine.
Okay. It is good to see everybody this evening. It's cold out there. Been a cold one today, but we're going to talk a little bit about indoor houseplants. I know that's something that several people have. I know Jaquita, she mentioned she had several, and we've been talking a little bit about it as you all logged in. But you know, a lot of people have indoor house plants, and it's one of those things of you know, what do you need to do? How do you need to take care of them? Matter if you're looking at indoor house plants, what are you looking at purchasing? Also, have you bought the right ones? Have you acquired the right ones? Do you have the right space for them? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Give me just 1 second. And what I'm going to cover is I'm going to cover a little bit about the different types of plants that you may have, and that'll give you kind of an eye, you know, that you may be looking for. But you know, I'll start out, you know, growing plants in the home or the office. It's a great way to, you know, to bring the outdoors inside. And that's what we're doing is a lot of people keep their indoor plants outside during the warmer months, and they may even bring them in. So, but it's something you can enjoy year round, whether it's outside, you keep them outside part of the time and indoor part of the time, or keep them inside all the time. Now, the biggest thing is, one of the big things is light and heat, but I'm going to cover a little bit about light. Light's going to be your single most important factor in successful indoor plant. Also the amount of light the plant receives, it's called plant intensity. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But on the high end, you know, you're looking at something that are 1,000 or more foot candles, and then a medium is around 500 to 1,000 foot candles. And then on the lower end, you're looking at about 50 to 500 foot candles. If you have less than 50, it's going to be tough for you to grow any plants inside, or for them to thrive, I guess I could say. Available light. You know, the biggest thing is identify, you know, areas in your interior that are great locations. Areas near windows and glass doors. My parents have sliding glass doors that face kind of east, and so those doors catch the morning sun, and those work fairly well. Those do fairly well. You want something maybe more of a south facing, but those do fairly well. But larger glass areas offer the more light, and the more light you get, the better off you are. I mentioned exposure. You know, you want something that's going to get that available light. If you have a window and it's got a tree in front of it, it may not get that much. Even though the leaves are off of it, it may not get that much. And so look at what you have available for your plants. Also, one of the things to think of is the closer the plants are to the glass, the more available light that they're going to have. Well, you need to also look at during the winter months, do not let those plants touch the glass. I received a message through, I guess it was Facebook, back last winter. Someone had a plant, it was a garden plant, and had it in a greenhouse, and it was actually touching the actual greenhouse, and it literally frostbit it burnt the plant, burnt the leaves on the plant. So need to be thinking about that as well. Also, places like roof overhangs, porches, awnings over windows and doors, that's going to reduce that area, that light availability. Some artificial light, you know, if you don't have low available light, you know, you may want to try some artificial light, but then you've got the expense of a power bill. So, but it can be a replacement. So let's cover a few things here, and you can see, and if you want to chime in here, if something you may have. But low light plants that are really good, there's a snake plant. That's one of those things of a plant that's fairly common, and you can see it there on the list where my cursor is. Snake plant, it doesn't need a lot of light, and so it's a low light plant, and so that's very good for plant growth. Kind of scroll down through here a little bit. Another plant that stands out here that a lot of people have is spider plants right here. A lot of people use a spider plant. My grandmother had a spider plant in her house. Normally kept it in the living room, and it would grow across a large doorway and did quite well. Did quite well on that. But that's something. There's a spider plant, and I'll scroll back up to the top just here a little bit, and I'll scroll down a page. Sorry about that. Some of the plants there that you can see that are common, you have your English ivy, you have Boston ferns. A lot of times people have put ferns out, porches, carports, that sort of thing during the spring, summer, enjoy those, and in the fall they bring those in. They need the light, but they need a little bit more light. They're going to need that 75 to 100, 150 foot candles of light, so they're going to need a little bit more light. Schiffelera, that's something as well that needs some light. I learned that the hard way on a Schiffelera, so that's another one. There's several there, other ones that you may have, but those are three that kind of jumped off the page that are fairly common, that people grow, or that people tend to look for. Into the medium or into the highlight areas, you got things like aloe vera. A lot of people keep those in their kitchen windows. I know that's we have one at our house here, and that's where it's at. My mom has one, and that's where she keeps it. You keep it in the kitchen because you may get burned at the stove, cooking around the stove, the oven, that sort of thing. And so that kitchen is a good place for aloe vera. So if you've got a kitchen that faces, has a really good, catches some sun through a window, that's a great place to keep it. Some other high light areas are Christmas cactus. Thanksgiving cactus is listed there. And so those are two common ones. We see a lot of those. And I saw some really beautiful cactuses that's several of my Facebook friends actually displayed this year. So you got to have them in a highlight area. They want that highlight. So the colas, also African violet. Those are several there. I'm going to scroll down here just a little bit on a few more that are fairly common. There's a heartleaf. It only needs a low light situation, but then you have a spider plant right there next to it, to the right. That's going to need more of a medium light. So if you're looking for plants, look at what area that you have available to what you would need for lighting, and that's kind of what you want to look for on those on the lighting. And what I'm going to do is, this is a publication here that I was looking at from it's called Care and Selection of Indoor Plants. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in the chat pod. That's a great publication from Mississippi State University, and that way you can check that out. But I'm going to stop my screen sharing right now, and if we don't have any questions right now, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Phil. How's that? And I'll go ahead and put that in the chat pod. Phil, they're all yours.
All right. Well, let me share my screen here. And I'm going to talk a bit about the benefits of houseplants, because it may not, other than your own enjoyment, the benefit is possibly something you haven't considered. And have to tell a little story again about my grandparents when I was growing up. My grandfather was very practical, had a large garden, loved plants as long as they could bear something that was edible. He had been a miner for over 30 years. He had black lung, and he was convinced that my grandmother was trying to steal his oxygen with her houseplants. He hated them. He thought they interfered with his breathing, but now we know that there's probably benefit in his breathing more than being a detriment to his breathing. Our homes now are very efficient. For several years, I lived in a 14 by 56 Fleetwood Festival single wide mobile home. And that was not very efficient. In the summer, got very hot. Winter got very cold, and you could almost sling a dead cat through the wall without hitting anything. But modern mobile homes are very efficient. Good insulation. They go together very well, even more efficient than most of your stick-built homes. They're very efficient, which is great from a energy conservation standpoint. But the downside of that is they're airtight. And if you think about all those glues and all those chemicals that are in the cabinets, that are in the flooring, that are in the carpets, that means that you're trapped inside with all those chemicals. So you have some pretty negative air quality in some of these efficient modern homes. And another thing about our society now, people just don't. I think the people who are watching this spend a lot of time outside, but the public in general, they just don't go outside as much as they used to. In fact, I have some friends who lived next to a family for a couple years before they realized that family had teenagers, and the teenagers just never stepped foot outside, so they didn't even know they were there. So you factor all those things together. You're in an efficient home. You're in there with all the chemicals. You don't spend as much time outside, and the air quality can be pretty poor inside a lot of our modern homes. So the inside of a modern home may be 5 to 7 times more polluted than the outside. That's hard to believe, but again, if you think about all those glues and all those chemicals that are at play inside that home, then it makes a little more sense. We don't think of NASA as being an agency that would study something like houseplants, but that's exactly where this study is going to come from. They did take a look at that, and I'm assuming that's because they were looking at how you could improve air quality for astronauts and people that are in a confined small space for a long period of time. And they did a study. It went on for about 10 years, looked at the benefits of those houseplants. We know, of course, that houseplants release oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide, so that was no big surprise. They can filter dust. A lot of that dust that's in the air, they'll filter that out. This was a little bit surprising, or I thought so, that they found that homes with a lot of houseplants, people tend to have fewer headaches. They tend to have fewer sore throats and dry throats. They don't have as much dry or itchy skin as other homes that don't have as many houseplants. And you have reduced fatigue in homes where there are a lot of houseplants. And I've seen in the past some studies that look at office spaces along these same lines, and they have shown that there's increased worker productivity where you have some houseplants in your office space. NASA also found in that study that houseplants can reduce stress by absorbing noise, kind of filter out those irritants. And houseplants have also been shown to reduce recovery time from surgery. So if you have somebody who's been to the hospital and they're coming home, that recovery time can be reduced if you have a lot of houseplants in the home. So as a result of that study, NASA looked at several different types of houseplants, and there were 9 that came out as the all-stars. These are the ones that really can improve the air quality inside the home. And a lot of these Jeremy has mentioned. But Eureka Palms, you may have these in your home right now. Jaquita probably has one of these. Releases moisture, so it prevents that dry air within the home. These are also very good at removing chemical toxins that you may have in your house. Lady palm is another, and this one was ranked one of the best for improving indoor air quality. So if you're looking at one plant to add to your collection and you want to improve the air quality indoors, the lady palm is going to be a good option for you. Another palm that ranked very high was a miniature date palm, also called the pygmy date palm. Also found to be very good at removing the indoor air pollution. And all of these palms, very common. You'll see those in a lot of homes. People who like plants at all, they'll typically have at least one of these palms. Philodendron was another. Lots of different types of philodendrons. Jeremy talked about the heart leaf that you see there at the bottom. These are especially good at removing toxins. Peace lily, also another one of those that very common at funerals and so forth. The peace lily is another one good at removing toxins. Dracaena, there's several different types of those. Those are good at removing toxins as well. Boston fern, this is the only fern that made the list, but the Boston fern, just like some of those palms and some of those philodendrons, it's good at removing those toxins from the air, but also adds humidity. So it can be a good addition to your home. The elite ficus, just a good general one for air purification. And I'll tell you that when I worked with the Kentucky Division of Forestry, I was there for several years, and we had one of these in our office. And I was there probably 2 years before I realized this was not an artificial plant. It didn't need any care really, and it just never looked any different. But I was standing next to it one day, and I thought, wow, that's a living plant. That's not artificial at all. And the rubber plant, another very common one, a great one for the removal of toxins. So those 9 are considered the top tier as far as your house plants go, improving your indoor air quality. So if you're looking at maybe you're having problems with headaches or you're having a lot of allergy issues, these 9 would be the ones that I would want to consider adding to your home. Some others, though, they did make the list. Ivy is good. That's got an honorable mention. Spider plant, which has been mentioned. Chrysanthemums, Gerbera daisies, the one on the far right there, those are good additions. Snake plants, the potted bamboo that you can find, it's gotten more and more common over the last few years. That's a great one to include. And dragon tree. Those are all good house plants that you might consider.
Bill, was that dragon tree, was that the one they called mother-in-law's tongue?
I believe so. I think that is the same one. So the recommendation for your number of house plants, and we were talking before the presentation, I know Shad seemed to think this was a little high for a house that's 1,800 square feet, but the recommendation is to have 10 to 15 house plants in an 1,800 square foot home. And that can get pretty crowded. I'm thinking about homes that have a lot of house plants. They can take up a lot of space, but if you really want to improve the air quality, it's not just a matter of having one small plant in the middle of the room. You do need to get quite a few in there, and 10 to 15 is what's recommended to improve your air quality. All right. And I will stop sharing there, but okay, that's all I had. So Shad, I'll turn it over to you if there are no questions.
Okay, give me just a second. I'm gonna have to. Apparently had a bunch of things opened on my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to be covering is the insect and disease problems that you might encounter with your house plants. I know we had at least some of the plants through the years that we've lost. They started to have, we've had the canker problems, we've had leaf spots. And so we're going to talk about some of those things and discuss some of the control strategies. You know, it's prevention is usually really, really important. But it might involve washing, hand picking some of the pests off, or eliminating some of the diseased leaves so that you're removing that source of inoculum of that disease. It might mean cleaning some things off, insect pests and the like, with alcohol. And then there are some insecticidal sprays that we're going to cover. As far as the prevention, you need to always make sure that you examine any cut flowers and new plants that you bring into the home to make sure that they're free of pests. And it's a good idea to isolate any new ones that you come in. I know some of you mentioned funerals and getting plants from those funerals. If you do already have plants in the house and you get new ones that way, make sure that you keep those isolated from the plants that you've already got in your home. When you're doing this, make sure that you watch those new plants and look for any infestations. They might have insect pests, they might have diseases, and just be careful about that before you bring them in. Also, make sure that if you are starting new ones, like Jaquita mentioned, starting new spider plants, make sure that you're using a sterilized soil for this so that you're not bringing in root rots or other things, soil pests. We've brought in fungus gnats in bags of soil before, so just make sure that you're careful about that. But springtails and earthworms and other things can come in through the soil. Washing with a soapy water, an insecticidal soap or something like that, but also just regular soapy water can help remove some of those sources of insect pests. It can remove aphids and Millie Bugs and scale insects from those broadleaf houseplants. And you can use 2 teaspoons of a mild detergent to a gallon of water, and that's sufficient to kill most of these insects. As far as the hand picking, if one or a few plants are involved, you might be able to control the aphids and Millie Bugs just by removing those portions of the plant that where they're located. You can use a toothpick or tweezers to accomplish this. And if you find caterpillars, those can be picked off by hand and destroyed. You might also find cutworms, slugs, and snails that are in their hiding places during the daytime, but it might be around the base of the plant. But those can also be picked off and destroyed or put outside if you're squeamish. As far as the alcohol is concerned, this is an easy way to control a light infestation of mealybugs or aphids on 1 or 2 plants. And Basically, you take a swab that's been dipped in alcohol and use the swab made to kind of rub those off, and that'll be a big help to you. And that's pretty simple. Everybody's got access to that. If you do find that you got a more significant infestation, you might want to consider the sprays. And relatively few insecticides are registered by the EPA for use on plants of the home, but there are a few that have been cleared. And I know that one of these that's mentioned later is malathion. And so just be careful and make sure that what you're using is labeled for use inside. Let me go to the next one. I'm going to show you some pictures here of some of the specific pests that you might encounter. White flies are a real common one. People bring these in a lot of times. Typically, as ag agents, we see these in high tunnels and greenhouses, and you often encounter them when you're buying tomato plants in the spring. But they also infest houseplants, and you might see this just really tiny white fly that moves around on the plant. They will sometimes leave the plant and fly around the house a little bit, but they're usually located right there at the plant. Most of you are familiar with aphids. These are sap suckers, and they can rapidly multiply, and they can spread disease, but they also weaken the plant. They're kind of the ticks of the plant world. And sometimes when you've got an aphid problem, you've also got an ant problem. So aphids are a particular problem. Fungus gnats are one that are usually a sign that you have overwatered the plant. So if you're really overdoing it on the water, don't be surprised if you end up having a problem with fungus gnats. And sometimes people don't make the distinction between fungus gnats, drain flies, and fruit flies. They all kind of look similar. And so at first, I've had people that thought that they brought in a vegetable or a fruit, and they didn't realize that it was a fungus gnat. So that's just something to keep in mind. Millie Bugs are down here in the left-hand corner. These kind of look a lot to me, Jeremy, like the hemlock woolly adelgid. They've got that white, waxy coat that gives them that mealy look. Scales is one. These don't move around a lot. They've got a crawler stage, but then they get on the leaf of the plant, and they have this protective cover. It's kind of like a turtle in a way. And so you'll see clusters of these. Thrips, oftentimes people don't recognize what the problem is. They just see the damage created by the thrips. But these are little slender black insects. And then I'm sure if you've got a concrete porch or anything, you've seen spider mites. These are kind of the reddish looking insect pests. As far as the fungus gnats are concerned, because I took this in the order of likelihood that a person would encounter them. And so the damage from these is caused somewhat by the maggots that cause injury to the root systems. They burrow down into the soil and feed on the roots and the crowns of the plants. And they can injure the plants and cause them to grow very little. And if you've got a large enough problem, they can appear off color, and they may even drop their foliage because of fungus gnats. And the adult gnats do no damage. They're just a nuisance. So it's the larvae of these that are causing the problem. So the control for this one is to avoid overwatering. Just don't stump your toe. On the thrips, this is the one that I said that you would probably notice the damage of it more so than the actual insect itself. And thrips, both the adults and the young cause plant injury, and most commonly it's injury to the leaves or flowers, and they suck out those plant juices. And if you look on this picture, you can kind of see that modeling. It'll be kind of a sunken at times looking place, but it's just kind of a mottled look to the leaves. And it's the injury is irregular or streaked. Sometimes there's silvered areas that are speckled with little black dots of excrement, and the foliage may blotch or drop, and flowers may be streaked or distorted. On this one, you really need to consider the pesticide because it's something that's hard to control any other way. They're pretty pervasive. Springtails are one that they're troublesome in the soil, in the flower pots, and in home greenhouses. And some species of springtails are slender and have segmented bodies. Others are more globular, and they don't really have that segmentation. They're whitish to blackish, and they can be tinted blue or purple. And this is another one that benefits from really moist soils. So if there's a lot of organic material and it's moist, you can have large numbers of these on the surface, and they typically feed on the decaying matter. So it'll be the soil that they are feeding on a lot, but they can chew on seedlings or other tender parts of the plants, especially parts that are down near that ground level that we were talking about, and they can be a pretty major nuisance. Spraying the surface of the soil and any place around the plates or the dish where you see them with mouth on is the control for this one. Spider mites is the little red one that we talked about, and you can see that it's showing up pretty clearly there. They injure plants by feeding on the plant juices, and it's usually first visible as whitish or yellowish speckled areas on the top of the leaves. And this one, to me, sometimes it can be easy to not, a lot of these houseplant diseases, it can be really easy to just overlook it and think, well, the leaf dried out a little bit, or, sometimes people just overlook that there is a problem. But on this one, as the feeding progresses, the leaves take on kind of a bronzed or a yellowed appearance, and they may drop. And if it's severe enough, it'll cause the plants to be stunted or even to die, and the flowers may fade. And this is one that you can syringe tough plants with a spray of water to break up the webbing and to dislodge the mites, or you can also use Malathion on this one. And when I mention Malathion to you all, I want to make sure that this is one that I would recommend that you do this outside, preferably. To me, Malathion's got a strong odor to it, and I don't think I'd be applying that indoors if I could avoid it. These are your scale insects that we mentioned, and you can see on this one that they are located down at the crown of the plant. And there's several different species of scale that can become a problem. So don't expect that the one that you encounter will necessarily be the same color. They can range from a gray to a black to kind of that brownish color. So they're pretty small. They're usually about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch. And again, they tend to be in clusters, either at the base of the plant or on the underside of the leaf. And they can lay eggs in a whitish colored sac that's secreted under the scale. And sometimes they can be mistaken for Millie Bugs if you don't look really closely at them. And the damage that they do is they suck the plant juices just like the aphids do. And so the heavy feeding will cause poor growth or stunted plants. And They can also excrete droplets of a sweetish sticky liquid that's honeydew, which can attract ants. And this is really problematic if you're somebody that likes to move your plants outdoors in the summertime. I know a lot of people that do that just to let them get a little more vigorous and force them to bloom. So ants can become a problem with either aphids or with the scale insects. This is the Millie bug that we talked about earlier, kind of having that whitish appearance, but the damage that they do, they suck out those plant juices. They can stunt or kill the plants. And you also see a kind of a sooty mold that grows on the honeydew that's excreted. So if you start to see this blackish film that's starting to cover the surface of the leaf of the plant, you might suspect Millie bugs. But the plants can grow slowly or they can wilt between waterings. And if you've only got a few, these can be removed by washing or using the alcohol. And you want to isolate the plants to make sure that you don't get a reinfestation. White flies are kind of a problematic insect. I know when I worked in the greenhouse at UK when I was getting my undergrad, and we battled white flies on a pretty often basis, and they were really hard to deal with. Both the adults and the young feed on the leaves of the plants by sucking out juices, and those infested leaves might become pale or drop off, and they can also become covered with the sticky honeydew, and the sooty mold can also develop on the plant leaves as a result of their feeding. This is one that you're going to want to spray with mouth on or permethrin type spray, and make sure, especially to focus on the underside of the leaves, because that's where they tend to hang out. And several applications at weekly intervals might be required. So this is not a one and done thing. You'll have to hit it several times to deal with this one. Slugs and snails, and no puppy dog tails. This is one that obviously is a result of moist soil conditions. They like to hide during the day under pieces of wood or pottery and fallen leaves. But during the night or on really damp soils, they'll come out. They feed on the leaves. You know, they've got a really rough mouth part that's abrasive, and so they scrape off the tissue, and they'll leave that trail of slime along the leaves. And I think most of you would recognize that. So as much as possible, try to eliminate hiding places in the pots for these. Maybe collect and destroy trapped slugs and snails every day or two. If you've got a little piece that you can lay in there that is like a trap, they will get underneath it and then just flip that over and look for them. It's kind of like you're looking for earthworms under a certain rock or something. But just take those out, collect them, and remove them from the plant. There are some slug baits that are available that have metaldehyde in them. And the only caution I would give to this is don't get carried away. These things can be toxic to pets, and so I would be careful. You could also consider, if the plant's big enough, using a beer trap. Slugs are like alcoholics. They are really drawn to beer, and they will consume it until they die. And so if you put a little trap in there, they're drawn to it, and they will drink themselves to death. So you can just put a little shallow dish, like maybe the lid of a butter bowl, and put beer in it, and that's the way to get rid of those. As far as specific diseases, bacterial spot, I just want to blow through some of these and just say that if you see something like this, I've seen this on, I think I've seen this one on spider plants before. But if you start to see diseased leaves, anything that's necrotic on the plant, dip some scissors in rubbing alcohol and clip that leaf off. You want to get rid of that source of disease on any of these. Some of them, you know, it may or may not work. I don't know how many of these diseases might be systemic, versus just localized, but removing the source of the disease is always a good thing to try. This is fungal leaf spot. This one is root rot, and it can be caused by non-sterilized soil, of course, but also overwatering. And viruses tend to be things that kind of give you that mottled leaf appearance. Crown cankers, you'll lose a lot of aloe plants to this one in particular. It's just, we've got a publication that I was going to recommend. This one's put out, there's a link at the end, but I'll reference it now. It's put out by Penn State, and they've got some really good publications. I don't know if you all can see that one or not, but there will be a link at the end. And it goes into some of these diseases and what you can do to control them. And it doesn't list the canker, but it does mention some of the root and stem rots. And so I'm assuming that's the same thing. But I know on the aloe, we've lost entire plants to this one before. But not everything is a disease or an insect. Some of these things can be abiotic problems. And Jeremy hit on some of this with the lighting. A lot of times people have spindly plants that don't have a lot of flowers or yellowing leaves, and they think maybe it's a disease, and it's a lighting issue. The plant just isn't getting enough light. Sometimes they will have leaves scorched or brown tips, and that can be because it's a plant that does not want a lot of sunlight and it's getting too much, or you've moved it outside to force it to grow a little bit too quickly in the spring, and it was not conditioned for that intensity of light, and you've scorched it. It's just like a sunburn. So be sure that you're careful about how you condition your plants to the setting that they're in, and be sure that you water them softly. You know, you're not trying to beat the plant to death with a garden hose. Just gently water. If you need to get dust off of them, a moist sponge that's obviously sterile is a good thing to use. And make sure that also that you're letting the soil dry out a little bit. Put your finger down in there, and it shouldn't be moist all the way to the surface. It should just be about an inch down in there that it's moist. This one can also be caused by temperatures getting too low. So if you run the heat pack and you go out of town on vacation in the winter, that can cause a problem for plants that are not used to that. If you see that there's small leaves and weak growth, that can be because of too wet or too dry conditions or the incorrect lighting. You can also damage the root system by letting the plant sit in water. And so those are the main culprits, what I mentioned: temperature, light intensity, and moisture, and the way that you water. So for more information, that publication is there at the bottom. If you just type in houseplants and Penn State, it'll probably pull that one up. Clemson also has a really good one on some of the diseases, and Nebraska, Lancaster has a good one on some of the insect pests that we talked about. And that's all I've got. Do we have questions? Looks like we got several things in the chat box. Jeremy has posted a link to plants that are toxic to pests, or to pets. And that's an important one to have. Cats seem to be especially bad for chewing on house plants. And maybe if you want to get rid of your cat, that's a way. I'm just kidding. But be sure that you check that one out to make sure that it's pet safe. Woody asked if we could email a note page for those NASA approved plants. So Phil, that one falls to you if you've got access to that one.
Okay. Yeah, I sent that. It's just a short list, Woody. It's not a whole lot of detail, but it will at least list those that went through in the presentation and what they do as far as the air quality and the pollution.
Jeremy, these ones that you posted that are from Michigan State, I guess is what, or is that Mississippi State?
Mississippi State. That's pretty much the one that covers the types of plants, and it's got a whole gamut. It's care and selection of indoor plants. Really good information there. It covers a lot of what both of you all talked about. Actually, more of what you talked about, what I talked about, Shad. And then I put the one in there. Let's see, where's it at?
South Dakota State.
The one that's the benefit, the South Dakota State. That hit on a little bit of what Phil talked about as well. It mentioned the NASA plants in there, Phil. So there's 3 or 4 good publications.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to add? And I'm looking at you, Jaquita. We deputized her before this talk started because she's like a houseplant aficionado. But not just Jaquita. If any of y'all have any comments or questions, feel free.
She did mention she recommends a regular schedule for watering and trimming. From her experience, it is helpful in maintaining plant health. Obviously, watering is needed, but we sometimes overlook the maintenance and removing of leaves. So yes, definitely.
Well, we didn't cover that one at all, so I'm glad she did mention that. Pruning and even we were talking before we started about a workshop on asexual propagation, and so spider plants and a lot of these house plants are really easy to start new ones, and so we didn't go into any of that. We didn't go into the pruning, and but hopefully what we told you will help you out. And Phil, I'm suddenly getting the urge to grow a bunch of those plants just to see if I it's like Popeye spinach. Maybe having these in will make me feel like Superman.
There you go.
In other words, having the plants with omega-3 fatty acids and phytotoxins.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever seen any that we didn't go into any of the herbs, but a lot of times people grow herbs indoors because they're edible. And that might be a totally separate talk, but a lot of people grow herbs as houseplants.
Yep.
For that reason.
Jaquita also mentioned she waters weekly and trims about every 2 weeks. Sometimes it is light, sometimes it's much more significantly. So, and she also mentions hard to grow inside. The herbs are. There's some that do okay inside, and some they do not.
Lemongrass and some of those we've had good luck indoors, and rosemary, as long as you've got a lot of light, and it can be a short-term plant. Many times I've gotten those at Lowe's that were pruned to look like a Christmas tree at Christmas, and in spite of all that I did, I couldn't keep them alive for more than a few months. They inevitably dried out on me.
I've got a question for the group. I don't know if Jaquita or maybe Paxton, or I see Margaret logged in here. Do any of you grow orchids? Do you have orchids inside? That's one that's used to be very tough, but there's been some mainstream ones come along. They're a little easier to grow. We've had some success with a few of those. And if not, Shad and Jeremy, I was thinking of somebody in Tennessee, yeah, and Jaquita says she has one orchid, very temperamental, and they can be. And what he said his mom does, has orchids and African violets. But somewhere down the road after April, a lady works for Tennessee State Parks. She does a lot of different species of orchids in her house, so that might be somebody to consider.
You know, I've never heard a talk on growing orchids before, and that might be a really good standalone workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Okay. And Jaquita's got a friend that grows orchids. Didn't read all of that. Let's see.
Move them out of the morning sun.
Good information.
I'll admit that when I was in high school and I was first developing an affinity for wildflowers, I attempted to dig up a pink lady slipper and pot it and put it in the house. And that was a dismal failure. And I found out after the fact that a lot of the orchids, you know, they have a symbiotic relationship with things in the soil, and they do not transplant well. We have moved some yellow lady slippers from sites that were going to be strip mined and relocated them to other places with success. So, you know, I'm not telling that to encourage anybody to mess with those. I'm just saying that if you know that some are in a place that can be, that's going to be disturbed, those one will transplant. But the orchids are finicky. Okay. Well, I guess that's it for the evening. It's almost 7, and my supper is ready. So what did Jaquita say there? We got one more.
She said tried several times and in different parts of the house windows, and said the best I was able to do is in a bathroom. Convinced it was the shower steam.
A lot of people that grow ferns mist them on a regular basis. I've seen a lot of people with the little mister bottles, and I think the biggest problem with those is they dry out.
I had a neighbor that would keep them in a basement during the winter, but they had to work with them.
My mom had success with a fern, and she misted it often. She kept it in the kitchen, and she cooked a lot, and so I think the steam from the kitchen helped it. This is back in the 70s when it seemed like it was a real common thing to have houseplants in the 70s. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you all for tuning in tonight, and we'll look forward to having you again. What do we have coming up, guys?
Next Tuesday, trapping. If you want to mention something about that, Shad.
Stacy White is going to be talking to us about trapping, and Stacy traps beavers and muskrat and all different kinds of things. So I'm sure he'll be showing us examples of different traps and telling us how to set a trap, and I think they call it having sets, working your sets. And so he is very articulate and very professional. He knows his stuff. So if you're interested in dealing with pests, or maybe you're wanting to get into trapping, it's an interesting thing, very historical, a lot of tradition behind trapping. And so we would invite you to come to that one. And then what do we have on Thursday? Have my calendar. up.
Thursday is septic system management during the pandemic.
Okay,
We've got Dr. Philip Brown from Virginia Tech.
very good.
And it's it's kind of sad when we scheduled him. I thought, well, that's a couple months in advance. Surely the pandemic will be over by then. But here we are. It's going to be good timing, I think.
Yeah,
May I add something?
absolutely.
Earlier tonight, you mentioned about the Thanksgiving and Christmas variety of the cactus, and something else that people grow often this time of the year is the Amaryllis.
Yes.
And I have one myself. And last summer, I was reading in a local newspaper. A gentleman showed a picture of one that he had in his yard, and it had bloomed. And I'd never heard of anyone doing that.
Wow.
But it's a different zone. It's in Tennessee, and he acquired it from his grandmother and didn't know anything about raising it. And from my understanding, planted it in the yard as an accident. And so I had a bulb that was dormant, and I thought, let's just see what happens. So I planted it out in the yard last summer. I did not have any blooms, but I had greenery or fronds or whatever you would call it, the leaves that came up off of it, and they bloomed right up into a frost, or came up. They grew frost. So I'm curious to see if it will come back next year, because it was truly experimental. Had I not seen that in the newspaper, I would have never tried it in the first place.
Right. Wow.
With all that leaf material, did the bulb divide? Were you able to get divisions from it or no?
I honestly did not look. I can't tell you. I just in curiosity, I just planted it to see what would happen.
We did a workshop with some special needs adults as a Christmas project, and we did the Amaryllis, and they loved it. You know, that's a simple little thing, especially with kids, or you know, that's an easy one to grow. You wet it one time, and that's all it needs.